I'm going to start where I left off the other day, and that's with philosophy. Okay, why? Because some people had some issues with philosophy. And one fellow raises this question. I'm going to start with his criticism or his counter definition for philosophy, which is more or less what people have out there. Okay, here it is. He said, philosophy is the search for truth. The best route to truth is the scientific method. Okay, so what is he saying? I mean, aside from the fact that he's talking about truth, I'm going to just skip over that. He's saying essentially philosophy is a branch of science. Okay, because he's saying it's a search for truth, and you get to that truth through the scientific method. So he's putting philosophy under science, under the scientific method. Then he continues, he says, science applies the data to philosophy for philosophical speculation. Again, he's putting philosophy under science. He's putting it as a branch of science. But then he goes in there and he puts something that puts philosophy between the sciences. Philosophy takes the results of various scientific investigations and systematizes them as a whole. Science is isolated from one another unless they are coordinated and unified by philosophy. Now he puts it as a middleman, as a go-between the sciences. And how does he conclude? He says, science is conceived from philosophy and is thus dependent on its theories to begin with. So he went full circle around. Now he puts science as a branch of science, philosophy. And this ends up with what people understand as philosophy being the mother of sciences. Okay, so this is contradiction. They live with these contradictions. They don't realize what they're saying because they don't analyze what they're saying. And so, yeah, the punchline is the best one of all. This fellow goes up there and he says, philosophy cannot be defined precisely because the subject is so complex and so controversial. Different philosophers have different views of the nature, methods, and range of philosophy. So after defining philosophy and saying first that it's under science and ending up with it's over science, then he says, oh, by the way, we can't really define philosophy very well, or better yet, at all. And that's where we are today. Okay, we are today at that point where nobody has ever defined the word philosophy. In fact, I mentioned the other day that the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, right? The only word you won't find defined in there is the word philosophy. And you would think it's the first word you're going to define if you're going to talk about that discipline, or you're going to make an encyclopedia of the discipline. And no, they haven't defined the word philosophy. You can look for it on your own. Okay, go to Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. You will not find the word philosophy. Okay, another visitor relating to Ayn Rand again, also tries to defend her as a philosopher, which I'm going to attack today, and says the following: Ayn Rand developed a philosophy for living. There's no such monster as a philosophy of living or for living. No, what philosophy for living is just a recommendation saying you should live this way. That's not known as a philosopher. It's known as your next door neighbor. That's known as the government. They tell you how you should live. Okay, so philosophy is not a way of thinking, which is the notion the common man has out there. You ask him, what is philosophy? Well, it's his philosophy. It's my philosophy. They're talking about a way of thinking. That's not philosophy. Because if that's philosophy, we have 8 billion philosophers on earth. And you cannot distinguish Aristotle from you or Ayn Rand from you. Okay, so you can't use that as a definition, as a notion of what philosophy is. You must take the trouble to sit down for a whole day and try to define the word philosophy. Then you can use the word consistently, scientifically, rationally. But if you just say it's a way of thinking, you haven't said anything. Okay, and so philosophy is also not a recommendation on how to live, none of that. That's known as politics. Politics is religion, not philosophy or physics. Okay, how do we define philosophy? Rational explanations of behaviors. And since science is rational explanations, philosophy is one of the branches, the other one being physics. And this visitor says, you are, whether you like it or not, a philosopher of science. No such monster as a philosopher of science, a philosopher of physics. That's nonsense. That was created by the mathematicians, the mathematical physicists. They talk in those terms, okay? Philosophy of science is not a branch of philosophy. We have science and we have physics and philosophy under them. That's the way it works, okay? So science is not a branch of philosophy, and philosophy is a branch of science, one of the 2 branches of science. And then this person continues, the branches of philosophy are, and says metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, aesthetics. No, philosophy branches are psychology, history, anthropology, sociology, animal behavior, and it continues. In other words, when you're talking about explaining behavior, then you're doing philosophy in any discipline that falls under science. Okay, that's what we say here. Okay, and what do people say? Well, they say the following. Okay, so I'll preempt you. Okay, they say the following: I don't like your definition of philosophy, Bill. Okay, why don't you like my definition? I thought it was a pretty definition. You tell me you don't like it. And so people raise some of these arguments. They say, it's not the one I learned in college. Well, that's a fallacy of authority. Or they say, it's your personal definition. No one voted for it. That's the fallacy of democracy. And someone might say, well, the etymology, where does it come from? Philosophy comes from the Greek love of wisdom. And they say, the world uses different notion of philosophy than you. We've used this for hundreds of years. Well, that's the fallacy of tradition. You can't use any of these arguments to defend yourself. What you need to come up with is a definition. I came up with a definition. Philosophy, rational explanations of behaviors. You don't like it? Come up with a better mousetrap. Defend your mousetrap. Get in the ring and defend it. You can't use the fallacy of authority, democracy, or tradition to defend your notion of what it is, what philosophy is. Now, if you go in there, you find this. You find the definition that you find in the Wikipedia and other places. And they say philosophy, the study of fundamental nature of what? Knowledge. So philosophy deals with knowledge, right? In fact, love of knowledge, right? Reality and existence. But it turns out that existence and reality are synonyms together with actuality and being. So what have we learned? You're just using synonyms. And knowledge is belief. Is that what philosophy studies? Belief? Okay. And so we'll get to that in a minute to show that knowledge is belief. But if I am able to make my case, then yeah, philosophy is not the study of knowledge, reality, or existence. It has nothing to do with any of that. In fact, reality, existence belong exclusively to physics. It is physics that deals with what exists out there and how it behaves from a mechanistic point of view. Okay. And then another definition there you'll find is this one from the Wikipedia. The first one was from another site. This one says from Wikipedia, the study. Again, study. We don't study in science because anybody can study and not know, get a 0 on the test. So we don't use the word study to define any discipline. It says of general and fundamental questions such as what? Existence, reason, knowledge, values, mind, and language. Okay, they put a few more. But again, they have existence and knowledge in there. And what is existence? Well, it's again from the Wikipedia, okay? The ability of an entity to interact with reality. But it turns out that reality is a synonym of existence. All they did was put in a synonym to define existence. What is a synonym? It's a circular definition, or no definition at all. It refers to the ontological property of being, whatever that is. Okay, let's find out what it is. Ontology, it's a branch of philosophy that studies what? Existence. Being, becoming, and reality, all which are synonyms. We haven't learned a single thing so far from all these people. Okay, and now what is interesting about this is that when you look up knowledge, okay, it turns out that they don't use as synonyms, like when you go to the thesaurus, they don't put a synonym of knowledge as belief, which they should. No one put belief as a synonym, but it turns out when you look for the antonyms, they put unbelief. So that was funny, I thought. Let me get rid of this. Give me a second here. Here we go. So knowledge, they don't put belief as a synonym, but they put unbelief as an antonym. So you figure out. Okay, so here we have a different definition. Okay, and it's the one that I use. Okay, and you see it there for philosophy, right? And you see how it falls within science. What is science? Rational explanations. It's divided in two parts. One is physics, the other one is philosophy. That's it. There's no more. There's no other category. Physics deals with explanations of phenomena. It deals with causes and mechanisms. Philosophy deals with rational explanations of what? Behaviors. And it deals with reasons and purposes. Now you can have a definition you can take to the bank. Okay? And, I can defend those definitions because they're all related. They're all related to the definition of science as rational explanations. What is it that we want to know in physics, which is what we deal with in this channel? We want to understand how the universe works. We want to know specifically, understand. No, we don't want to believe. We want to understand. We want to understand how gravity works. We want to understand why, in the case of philosophy, why someone did something or why an animal behaved in a certain way. Those are the questions of science. People want to understand. It doesn't mean that you're going to believe, which is what mathematical physics harps upon. They want you to believe, and so they come and they try to prove to you with evidence so that they know, so that you know, meaning you believe. That's what it's all about. And we don't do that in science. Science has to be objective, meaning you explain a mechanism in the case of physics so that people understand what you're proposing as far as the mechanism. And we don't run experiments, like this fellow said, a science critic, because we can't run any experiment to detect invisible, intangible entities. We're done. That's it. So you have to define science in a way that you include those phenomena, the invisible, intangible ones. Okay? And so whatever you define science, whatever you define physics as, hopefully it includes an understanding of invisible, intangible phenomena, okay, or objects that mediate, the invisible, intangible objects that mediate phenomena we can't see or touch. We don't see the mechanism. Okay, that's the issue. Okay, another fellow comes here and he has this notion. He says the following, also again about Ayn Rand, says, the A is a thing. Rand is huge on this. Okay, A is A. Makes a lot of sense. You know, A is A. I love A is A. What is it called? The law, as they call it, the law of identity. Okay, it's her way of saying shoot the observer, in a way, in a sense, right? I don't know if that's what that is. Okay, this is what Ayn Rand actually says. Okay, regarding all this, especially existence, because she got into the issue of existence. Whoever touches the word exist, the word entity, whether knowingly or not, has crossed the line into physics. They're not doing philosophy anymore. They're not doing ontology, epistemology, or metaphysics, any of that nonsense. There's no such monsters as those. No, when you touch the word exist, when you touch the word entity, meaning thing, meaning object, you've crossed the line into physics. Those words belong exclusively to physics, and we don't have 10 definitions for them. We have one. You don't like the definition? You got to get inside the ring with your definition. Sword and shield, defend it. Okay, we're going to try to smash whatever you come up there with. Okay, so what did Ayn Rand say? She said the primacy of existence, of reality, is the axiom that, what? Existence exists. Absolutely love that. You know, I call it word wizardry. That's what it is. You know, existence exists. Oh man, I need a beer to understand that one. That the universe exists. The universe? There's no such physical object as the universe. You should never put an article in front of the word universe. A universe, the universe, because there's no such monster in physics. I mean, you can do that in ordinary speech in the course of a debate, a discussion, but let's make sure that when we go back, we get rid of that article. Articles can only be placed in front of objects. The only things that can serve as nouns in physics are things. Objects, things. Then you can put an article in front. You can't say the energy. You cannot say a force. Those are not physical objects. An orbit, you can't use any of those. You can't talk like that in physics. Now, we do that anyways in the course of discussion, no problem. But as long as we understand that you cannot use those as physical objects, and that's part of the problem with the language, okay? So, existence exists, that's an irrational, it's just word wizardry. Universe exists, well, that's irrational. You cannot say that the universe exists, okay? Not in physics, not in science. You can do that in ordinary speech and religion, fine. Not in physics, not in science. Why? Because the universe is a concept. Okay, so this word universe is a concept, and concepts don't exist. You cannot say that a concept exists, not in physics, not in science. You can do that in ordinary speech. You can say love exists, intelligence exists, fine, but you can't do that in physics. In physics, only objects may be said to exist. That follows from the definition of the word exist. Okay, and we'll get in there. You have the definition. Existence, what is it? Physical presence. What is physical referred to? A thing, an object, an entity, a body, a substance, whatever you want to call it. All those are synonyms. Presence, that's location. It must have location. There has to be distance between that thing and my chest in order for it to meet the definition of exist. You can't do that with the word universe, because universe is matter and space. That's why universe is not a thing. Universe is a concept, okay? And yeah, a lot of people have problems with that. And then she continued, a thing is itself. A is A, right? Existence is identity. No, we have a problem with that. A serious problem. It's an irrational statement, what she just said. A thing is itself is nonsense. It's poppycock. That's law of identity. A equal A. That's for people who have to go to the mental asylum. Okay, it has no meaning whatsoever in physics to say that the ball is the ball. No kid, yeah. I don't know what that could possibly mean. Existence is identity. Absolutely not, because if identity is a thing, is itself, they're not finished. Existence is not identity. It's identity plus location. You need location for it to be existing. And that's what all these people missed, including Ayn Rand and everyone that came before her. And after, by the way. Okay? Things are what they are in identity. And again, the universe is not the universe. I mean, whatever that means. The universe is not an object, not a thing. It's an unscientific statement. Existence can only apply to objects, and it cannot apply to concepts. Okay? And if you want to use the word exist in a rational manner, it had better have an object, and that object had better have location. Okay, and so here's a more or less a summary of why Ayn Rand just chased her tail around and come up with anything, because she was trying to do physics, whether she knew it or not, and she ended up with nonsense. And what is the nonsense? The nonsense is that she said that the universe is beyond consciousness. In other words, you don't need consciousness for the universe to exist. That's the way she put it. And then everything she said after that included conscience, including see, touch, feeling, senses, meaning consciousness. So she contradicted herself. That's all she did in her reasoning. And here it is. I'm going to show you why she did a circular reasoning, okay? And why she did nothing different than Hume and Kant, for example, to folks that beat her to it, okay? She starts out by saying the universe exists independent of consciousness. Well, we can't say the universe exists, but we understand what she's saying. She's saying like the matter out there, you know, every atom in the universe is out there independent of consciousness, okay? No problem there. But this is not what she says in the rest of her dissertation. She says consciousness is the faculty of perceiving that which exists. She talks about perception now. She's going to introduce see and touch. Okay, she says first it's independent of consciousness, meaning of see and touch. Now she's going to talk about perception. She introduces see and touch back into her discussion. And now she says the most ridiculous thing ever, to exist is to be something. Absolutely not. This is the same thing that Hume said and the same thing that Kant said. And there's her own words. A thing is itself. Existence is identity. If existence is a thing, meaning identity, meaning itself, we're missing the word location. That's what Hume and Kant missed, and that's what Ayn Rand missed. She did not figure out the word location. That's what's missing in the word exist. And then she said, something exists which one perceives. Absolutely not. You don't perceive the rope. You can't see or touch the mediators of gravity or of light or of magnetism. So this is not true. You cannot say that something exists which one perceives, aside from the fact that perception is a personal issue. You know, if I'm on drugs and I can't perceive because, you know, I'm floating out there, you know, what does that tell me about existence? Does that mean that the table exists for you because you can perceive it, you can touch it and see it, and, you know, I'm in left field with my mind and I can't see or touch it because, you know, I'm flying in cloud nine? Does that mean that the table doesn't exist? It's a question of perception of each individual. Is it subjective? What she called objectivism, and all she does is a subjectivism. Then she says existence and consciousness are axioms you cannot escape. Absolutely not. Existence has nothing to do whatsoever with consciousness, and that's what she said at the beginning, that it's independent of consciousness. And then she just rubs in more of that. She says something needs sight and or touch. Absolutely not. Awareness of entities, sight and touch. Absolutely not. Perceive things, entity. She talked about perception, about consciousness, about see, touch. And as long as she went into see, touch, she just went around in circles in her reasoning. So no, Ayn Rand never figured it out. First, because she was dealing with a subject matter she was not very familiar with, which was physics. She didn't realize that existence and entity belong to physics exclusively. So she was not doing philosophy, philosophy of living, of life, or whatever it's called, recommendations on how to live, whatever you want to call it. None of that is physics. None of that is philosophy. That's just religion, just an opinion. Opinion, beliefs, that's a religion, okay? And some people say, well, Bill, what are you saying? You're saying that the universe is a concept, so we're living inside or within a concept? Is that what you're saying, Bill? And again, it's because people have, they don't have a very rational mind, so they don't know what the issues are. So let's make sure we answer that question, okay, for those who still have stumbling blocks, mental blocks to understand that issue. So let's go with that. Okay, universe is a concept, yes. Concept, a word that invokes or embodies two objects or two words treated as objects. So the fellow says, are you suggesting that we live inside a concept? We're living within a concept? And this is important also for the flat earthers who say, you know, what do you mean? You can curve water without a container, you know, so to speak. So it's like they're suggesting that, you know, the universe is some kind of container, space is some kind of container. That's what they're insinuating. That's what they have in the backs of their minds. And so we have to go slowly for these people and say, universe, we define it as matter and space. Okay, matter and space, matter is all the atoms out there, okay, in existence. They have distance with respect to each other. Each one has location. That's independent of consciousness, true, like Miss Ayn Rand said. And the other portion of the word universe is space. So what is space? Well, space is a synonym of nothing, and that is that which has no shape. An object is that which has shape. Space is that which does not have shape. If it doesn't have shape, it doesn't have a border. It doesn't have a surface. It doesn't have a perimeter. And so not even God can get out of that which doesn't have shape. There's no border to cross. Okay, so space is not a container. It's not a thing. Okay? And so the issue is the way you have to look at this is the atoms in your body form part of the matter that comprises the so-called universe. Universe is matter in space. Your atoms form part of the matter. It's not contained within any container. Okay? It's floating in nothingness. There is no such thing as space. There is no such thing as nothingness. And so you cannot escape nothingness. No atom can leave space because it would have nowhere to go because there's no place to cross. There is no border to cross. Not even God can escape space. Okay? And so to say that we inhabit or live within the universe is what the irrational statement is. Okay? So this is the way you're supposed to look at that under rational physics, rational science. Okay? Visitor says, continuing with this line of reasoning, okay, religion is mysticism. No, absolutely not. In fact, if you look up the word, well, you could say it is. Mysticism is belief. That's essentially how it's defined. But just want to clarify that religion has nothing to do with God. Okay? Religion has to do with opinion and belief. And that's what mysticism is. And atheism is a religion. Okay? Why? Because, and I say it's the religion of the mathematicians. A person who is an atheist is a person who does not understand the scientific method, has never done science in their lives. That's what an atheist is. Why? Where's the problem? The problem is that an atheist says, I don't believe in the existence of God. The theist, they say, I believe in the existence of God. And the agnostic says, I don't know whether to believe in the existence of God or not, and something along those lines. All three of them are irrational statements, are irrational people. The way we do it in science, we say, let us assume that God exists. God can never be a theory, so you cannot say that you believe or don't believe in the theory of God's existence. God cannot be a theory. God can only be a thing. You can say God is a thing, okay? And that's if God has shape. Now, if God is a concept, you cannot even talk about existence. You cannot say God exists because God is intelligence or God is love. That's even worse. But if God is a thing, like a human, the guy with a magic wand that made the universe, fine, no problem. You start out on the right foot. Now you have an object. Now, in order for God to exist, I don't care if you believe or don't believe or are not sure, none of that has any bearing on the issue before us. The issue before us is, does God fit the definition of existence? For that, God has to be an object. Apparently, he's an object if he's a human, right? So we've got an object, a thing, but now he's got to have location. He's got to have distance with respect to my chest. God can hide in the 20th dimension for all we care. There has to be a straight line of direction from God all the way to me. So he can hide anywhere he wants. I don't care. But if he exists, there's got to be a straight line of direction from God to me. And he cannot escape that, no matter what dimension he wishes to hide in. Okay? Person says, morality and politics are not religion. Yeah, they are. Morality is an opinion, okay? I kill your brother. Is that moral or what? Is that, your opinion? Well, I think it is because, I think it was good and you think it was bad. I think it was moral. I had to kill him. Maybe he did something to me, and so I thought it was good to kill him, and you think it's bad to kill him. So what have we learned about morality? And, we've had homosexuality for centuries considered immoral. Now it's not. Now it's part of the mainstream. So the question is, what are we going to say? We have an opinion about it? Is that what it is? One that Ayn Rand used to use as altruism, is that moral or immoral? I mean, you can go on and on, just pick up any word, and you'll find one person on one side of the issue and another one on the other side of the issue. We haven't learned anything. And politics, obviously, is religion, because politics is all opinion, how we should run the world. And someone says, well, there's a better way of running the world, or more effective way of running the world, than in another way. Okay, so you have the way of running it, we'll call it Form A and Form B. There's a way A of doing things, a way B of doing things. And the guy says, see, with the way A, we're more productive, we're more efficient, blah, 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 blah. And the other person might say, yeah, but look, people are more miserable and so on. He might raise some other issues. And so what have we learned? It's just an opinion. Again, what we look for in science is explanations and not opinions of or recommendations of how to run the world or how you should behave or whatever. That's known, again, as your next door neighbor. He tells you how you should behave, or the government, any of those. Ayn Rand derived her views scientifically. Well, no such monster. How views are derived is irrelevant, first of all. I don't care if you had a bad dream or you did an experiment. You can derive your views any way you want. It's when you come to the conference you have to explain something, not how you came to your conclusions. I mean, if you want to put that as an interesting anecdote, that's great. But the meat of it is the explanation, not how you came to your conclusions. And then her views, that's an opinion. I don't care what her views are. We need an explanation. And again, all she did was, politics, recommendations on how to live, not philosophy. Philosophy, explanations. And again, we have to define the word philosophy in order to categorize her properly. And then the perceptual concretes of existence. Again, when you get into perception, you get into not objectivity, which is what she called her subjectivity. Yeah, perception is subjective. So why she says on the one hand that the universe exists outside of consciousness, and then she goes in there and says the only way to determine what exists out there is through see, touch, perception, consciousness. So she just went around in circles. That's all she did. And again, because she was not a philosopher, she was not a scientist, she was not a physicist, which is what she tried to do, whether she knew it or not. Okay, let's get to, I just want to, I guess before I get into knowledge, just want to summarize what this site is about, okay? And again, we're not asking you to believe, to share our knowledge, our beliefs. We're asking you to understand what this site is about, okay? And it takes a long time for people to understand what this site is about because we're very different than everybody else out there. We say absolutely nothing like anybody out there on the planet, okay? Here it is, rational science. We have a paradigm shift, major paradigm shift. We're breaking completely with the past. Anything below the year 2000 and backwards was nonsense. We never did science, we never did philosophy because we never defined those words. We never did physics, And to this day, we have no definition from the establishment, okay, for physics or for philosophy. And no one from Aristotle to Ayn, right? None of those figured it out. Why? Because they had no definition. See, if they would have defined the terms, we could use them consistently and apply them. But since they never define these words very precisely, very concisely, so that we can use them consistently, scientifically, rationally, because of that, they were not scientists, they were not philosophers, they were not physics. They're outside of all that, okay? All they did was politics, recommendations, and they say, this is how you should live, this is what you should do, your next door neighbor. And all they ended up with today, and that's the proof, the evidence. You want proof, evidence, truth? Here you have it. What do we have today? We have irrational notions of how the universe works. What do we have? We have no definitions. We confuse physics with philosophy. We think that existence and entities belong to philosophy, ontology, epistemology, and all that stuff. No, those words belong exclusively to physics. And so people say, I'm a philosopher. Oh, why are you a philosopher? Oh, because I try to figure out what exists and what an entity is, what a thing is. In fact, those words are treated within the world of philosophy. And the people who should be treating with those words don't do it, and those are the physicists, so-called physicists, mathematical physicists, and they say, no, we do equations, that's all we do. And so, yeah, entities' existence, they don't belong to philosophy. And until you get a hang of that, you don't know what this site is about. So we've changed all that, and we don't care what the rest of the world says, we don't care if we're the only people on the planet who hold those views. This is not about tradition, it's not about democracy, it's not about authority, it's about defining words that no one has defined until today. And again, the issue there is that these words are up for grabs. No one has defined them, so you're welcome to define them today. If you go to the dictionary, go to the encyclopedias, you won't find rational definitions. You'll find all kinds of problems with them. Even the same philosophers, epistemologists, whatever they're called, the physicists, they'll tell you the same thing. Well, we don't have really a definition. We don't know what a point is. We don't know what a line is. They have no definitions for these. We don't know what time is. They don't know any of these words. They don't have a definition, but they use them. And when you ask them, well, what's the definition of this? They say, go to the other side of campus, ask a librarian, ask a English major, and he'll tell you, And you go to them and they say, well, go to the dictionary. We defined it there. And when you go in there, you find irrational definitions. That's all you find. Inconsistent definitions. And if you go, again, with the word philosophy to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, you won't even find the word. So whatever. These words are up for grabs. You can anyone is welcome to define them now, because whatever you find in the dictionaries are not rational, are not defensible.